Tere tulemast. Velkommen, rigtig hjerteligt velkommen. And first of all, congratulations to Yoko Alander for this Estonian edition of the book Soft City. It makes me happy and it makes me glad to see and to hear the title in Estonian, in the soft Estonian language. Pehme linn sounds very soft to me, and it's very appropriate because the title is Soft City. Palju õnne, Yoko. I'm very pleased to have the author of the book, David Sim, here, and he's the architect from the Danish firm Geel Architects. And I know your master, so he's the guru of the Danish soft city planning, Jan Geel. I think we all know him. And when I met him first was here in Tallinn in 2018, so he was already past 80 at that time. And we went out to see Baltiam, and we saw also some trams that we don't have in Denmark anymore. But he also came to Copenhagen this year to the Amalienborg castle, and he came to dinner with the Crown Prince couple at the occasion of the 100 years of Danish-Estonian diplomatic relations. We were very happy that he was part of this because it shows how important city planning is for us and how much his idea of cities for people, how that has become part of our cooperation between Denmark and the three Baltic states. So I was very happy to see him there together with the Crown Prince, foreign ministers from all three Baltic countries, etc. And I said the trams, we don't have them in Copenhagen anymore, but you may have noticed that my soft spot for trams has made me put this up on the wall for you. It's a poster, an old poster from the 1950s. And it's from when Copenhagen still had these beautiful trams. Viggo Vagnby is the artist, and he was very well known for his tourist posters. And with a twinkle in his eye, he would highlight a characteristic element of the place that he was portraying. I've chosen to show you this famous poster, probably one of the most iconic of all the Danish posters in history. And it's called Wonderful Copenhagen, and it shows this policeman holding back traffic for a mother duck and a line of ducklings. So it's a very sweet and it's a very soft projection of power. It's the sort of projection of power that I like because it shows that it should be used for the good. It should be used for cities also that are livable and accommodating for all, including the ducks. And I think in Denmark, we probably do have a very soft spot for ducklings. You know Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale about the ugly duckling, and he turned out to be a beautiful swan. And that is why, Yoko, I have chosen this present for you. Because at the occasion of the launch of your book, I have this present for you. And this, please come up. It's a little gray sculpture of a duck. It was made for Hans Christian Andersen's 200 years jubilee in 2005. And you know, it takes a Lego builder 3.5 hours to actually assemble all the little bricks, put them together, glue them, and to create this little sculpture. And it requires concentration, dedication, and of course, this soft spot for playful solutions. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for everything, Christine. Oh.
And also I have this little soft gray bag for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have more gifts for everybody because you all deserve it. I couldn't choose who to give a gift to because you all deserve it. You deserve it for joining us here. David Sim, you deserve a gift because you have written the book. Without you, it wouldn't be possible to translate it. So please.
Well, thank you. That's so kind. You've got no idea what a Lego fan I am. So.
And all of you will get the same gift, not with the duck, because this is only for Yoko, but you will get other goodies from the Danish embassy. So let's bring back a few memories of the cooperation that we've had for many years. While we talk today, I think there will be references to previous cooperation. Our cooperation goes way back, more than 100 years of diplomatic relations. It goes even 800 years back. But let's not only do that, let's talk about the future. I really want us to talk about how we can make cities more playful, more soft, and how we can make sure that they are more livable in the future. And with these few words, I will pass on the floor and the microphone. I think we need to use the microphone for the purposes of our online audience, who I also want to welcome to this session. And I will pass on the floor to you, Emil Rode from the Danish Cultural Institute. Please come up.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Ambassador, for your kind introduction. So greetings, audience, and greetings, our online viewers. So I'm Emil Rode from Danish Cultural Institute, from the office based in Riga, and I'm in fact Latvian, so I'm a neighbor of Estonia, so we are even closer than Denmark in a way. So now we have the first part with the opening speeches, so I will introduce my co-panelists. So first I will give the floor to the person who made this Estonian soft translation of the Soft City book possible, Yoko Ono, Yoko Alender of the publishing house Yoko Oma, so it's so close. And she's a parliamentarian, member of Riigikogu, and urban planner, architect. So the floor is yours, Yoko, please.
Thank you. And first of all, this morning I actually want to say a whole lot of thank yous, because of course I have to start with David, who I actually met when about 5 or 6 years ago. I had translated and then published the first book by Jan Gehl. We call it a little bit the Bible of urbanism, the theory of humanistic urbanism, the cities for people. And I happened to go to Copenhagen, and I had a chance to visit Gehl Architect's office. And then there was a lovely Swedish lady who was working there, Eva Westermark, and she wasn't going to be in the office herself. She had also visited us in Estonia when presenting the book, but she recommended me that you go and meet David. I think you will like him and you will have something in common. And David came with his Brompton bike. I remember he was so proud of it for some reason. And he told me about this book that he was writing. And that very moment, I heard what he was gonna do, and that it was actually about the bits that really work, that actually also put Jan Gehl's theory into action, the practical tools. I was telling him that, okay, we have to publish your book in Estonian as well. So I am so happy that sometimes things do take time, but when you have the right values and the right direction, you will get there. And you will get there if you do things together. So there is a saying, if you want to do things fast, do it alone. If you want to go far, go together. So definitely we are going together. Apart from David, I also want to thank the partners who we are publishing this together with. It's the Estonian Center for Architecture. It's also the Estonian Academy of Arts. Also the crowdfunders. There are people all around Estonia who really care and burn for this issue, who have supported us. Also our host today, Royal Danish Embassy and Mrs. Ambassador. I think there is some kind of natural understanding for these issues in this lovely house, this lovely building, Danish Embassy in Tallinn, where we are. And I think it's really helping to bring together, to have these partners. They're both the Danish Embassy and also the Danish Cultural Institute. It's both about culture, it's also about business, it's also, but mainly it's about people. So I think this is something that that really shows that I think also we're doing it in a right time. That's why we managed to create these kind of waves, because sustainability is something that is on everyone's minds these days. And actually, due to the challenge we have in sustainability, we can also add quality of life. That's the main thing. The experience of living in an urban environment, in that environment can also actually be a village. You know, in Danish, we have the bløde by, which people who also maybe speak some of the Scandinavian languages, the word for village is also the same word for town. So that talks about the values, about community, about being outdoors, about sustainability. So thank you, friends, and let's have a lovely event. I am really proud to also give the floor to David, who's the main man.
And if we can change the slides, please. This works. It's always the, yes. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Let me talk to Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. It's a big honor to be here, and I'm actually quite moved. I'm actually not a Dane, although I'm kind of representing Denmark. I'm a kind of wannabe Dane, a wannabe Nordic. And I guess because I'm from Scotland. And for me, standing in this beautiful, soft building today is very symbolic, because it's about the soft power of Denmark and the generosity of this kind of investment you've made in Estonia, the same investment you've made in Scotland with the beautiful Danish consulate in Edinburgh. And it was the Danish consulate in Edinburgh that made it possible for Jan Gehl already in the late 70s, I think he first came over. And Jan Gehl was teaching in Scotland. And that was my connection. And I always say Jan Gehl saved my life, because I probably wouldn't have been in architecture had I not heard those lectures so generously sponsored by the Danish Institute in Edinburgh. And I think this is just really symbolic to end up, it's like life's full circle to end up back here. And I'm also incredibly proud of Yoko and her work. Estonia is the smallest language group so far who've chosen to translate Soft City. Next week, it's coming out in Chinese, which I think will be the biggest language group. But I think the soft power is also thinking at this small scale. My relationship with Denmark and Danish building started very early. Already in the 1970s, I was experimenting with Danish prefabricated building systems. This is kind of like, you can see, this is actually a sustainable community here. You can see the public transport is already operational, although it's still a building site. And my mom used to be really crazy, like, oh, there was this Lego everywhere. Oh, thank you. There was this Lego everywhere. And she said, when's your town ever going to be finished? And I said, maybe the smartest thing I ever said, it's a town, Mom, it will never be finished. And of course, what's this soft? And this soft thing is, of course, it's about humanity. It's soft, and there's a famous poem by a Danish poet, Inger Christensen, Den bløde by, the soft city. And just asked, when will we build a city which is soft like the human body? And as the ambassadors already mentioned, the king of softness is Jan Gehl, now actually 85, and this is from a Swedish newspaper, but he's the Robin Hood of architecture. And that's because he told the story of a hard city, Copenhagen, which was a hard city, which became a soft city through some very simple changes, like taking the cars out and making it nice to be a human being, walking down Strøget, kind of smelling the coffee, smelling the sausages, relaxing a bit, speaking quietly because you don't need to shout because there's no traffic noise, and relaxing as your kids run around because they're not going to get run over. And just some simple, I don't know, slogans of Jan. You'd say something like, first of all, we should think smaller. I mean, think big, think smaller. And many of the great things about Copenhagen that we can learn for soft city are small things, like discovering the value of the backyard is already there. And just, if you take away the trash, if you take away the dumpsters and all those things, it can be a beautiful space. It can be a secure space. It become an amazing, great big back garden in the middle of the city. And for families with children, now how Copenhagen became the most livable city in the world, it became great for families with children because the kids in 45 seconds could run outside and be in this car-free, safe courtyard. And there'd be 200 parents watching as they cook dinner. And maybe when your dinner's ready, maybe it takes more than 45 seconds to get them in again. But this is a simple thing, a soft, small thing, which brought people together. And of course, the common identity, which comes from sharing a courtyard, that's important too, to bring neighbors together. And of course, it becomes a great microclimate. Because it's protected from the wind, it catches the sun. And even if the courtyard is a few degrees warmer in the winter and a few degrees cooler in the summer, that has a huge influence on heating costs and air conditioning costs. And of course, it's a protected acoustic space. So you can sleep with an open window in the middle of a city. You don't hear the traffic noise. You can hang your washing out. You're protected from the noise of fumes and so on. And all of those little details have meant that even when we build new areas, and this is from Sluisholmen in Copenhagen, we use this courtyard model because it's so nice. And this little greenhouse is another small addition, especially important during Corona times. That became your co-working space. So think smaller, think lower. You don't need to build skyscrapers, and you can think in layers. This is from Amager, and this is an Amager sandwich. And this is an example of a layered building. And on the ground floor, it's a supermarket, which speaks to the street. That's very practical. And in the middle part, it's a sports hall, which is very useful for the community. And then on the roof, it's housing. And so it's a way of using layers to give a lot of density, but without height. And one of the most amazing things we've discovered is the value of the ground floor. Because living on the ground floor, nobody wants to live in the ground, they said. But actually, if we take care of it, and if we make a little edge zone, a little garden, 1, 2, or 3 meters, your own front door and your own post box, suddenly living on the ground floor become incredibly valuable. And I think we have 1 or 2 developers with us. What we've discovered in Copenhagen, that if you take care of these 1 or 2 meters on the ground floor, at the front and at the back, people will pay 25% more to live on the ground floor. And that's normally the apartments that you can't sell. And it's a simple thing, small thing, makes a big difference. We can also think slower. And we I know what they say about hurry slowly. In Copenhagen, everybody cycles. So grandma cycles, grandpa cycles, the little 8-year-old girl, even the scary guy with sunglasses, he's cycling too. And that's because we've made it really, really easy to cycle. It's so simple. We've got this system with the separate bike lanes. It's at a different level. You know exactly where you are. You've got the pavement on one side, the parked cars on the other. It's very, very easy to cycle. And then you can be spontaneous. It takes 10 seconds to stop because you're in the same airspace as the pedestrians, and you can smell the bakery. You can stop for your Danish pastry. And in 10 seconds, you can be inside the bakery buying your bread. And it's important too that this slow movement connects people together. So it's actually about an ecosystem of business. So if the shopkeepers are worried that by taking parking spaces away to make bike lanes, that will be a problem, they shouldn't worry, because cyclists and pedestrians spend much more in the shops than the people in cars. So it's a good investment. And then just one more example of slowness. This is a picture of a time machine. And you're looking at this picture and what was he talking about? And if you see, the slabs of the pavement continue across the side street. The right to continue walking, the cars have to stop for you. And that means that if you got a 7-minute walk to your office or to the bakery, that 7-minute walk becomes a 3-minute walk because you don't need to stop for the cars. And if you've got kids, your 8-year-old kid can walk 12 blocks to school on their own because they don't cross the street. And that maybe gives you 45 minutes extra a day or an hour every day. And of course, there's nothing more precious than time. It doesn't matter how rich you are. Everybody's only got 24 hours to spend. If you're lucky, you'll get 8 hours sleep. If you're lucky, you only work 8 hours. And what's left of that time, so every minute you save is hugely important. And this is a very instinctive system. No, you don't need an app. And even the driver who sees this for the first time knows how to use it. You know, you wait for the pedestrians, and when they've gone, you can move on. And then finally, just thinking simpler. What are the really simple things we can do? We can make it easy to have a stroller and to have a bike. We can add these little balconies. So even the old apartments in the city, we can click on, like a piece of Lego, a balcony on the back, and a small apartment becomes great. And during Corona times, these balconies were so valuable. And I guess you've seen that in Italy, you know, the parties and everything. But for the Danes too, these balconies became incredibly important. And now we're beginning to touch on things like climate change. And Copenhagen has experienced some very severe floods in recent years. And there was a big question how to solve this flooding issue. Should you spend billions and billions of kroner building pipes under the city that are only used maybe, you know, 2 or 3 days a year? And so they came up with a much smarter, softer system, which is saying, let's make soft landscape in the city. So rather than those pipes underground, we'll make floodable landscape, green spaces, which are parks for 360 days of the year. And when we have these cloudbursts, they'll fill up with water and slowly filter. So Copenhagen now has a whole series of really beautiful park spaces, which are great amenities for your neighborhood. And a few days a year, you'll get a poetic reminder of what climate change is. And of course, in a normal, this is in the climate quarter, what it means, more green, which is lovely to live with. It's quieter because the plants absorb the noise. They absorb those nasty nanoparticles. And of course, they're very beautiful to look at. And I guess all of this means thinking softer. The book is about accepting that we're living more densely in cities. And I would say there's kind of a kind of formula, which is about we need diversity, because density alone is not enough. People don't move to the city because it's more crowded, or because it's more noisy, or because it's more constrained. People want to be close to things. So we have to think how we deliver density. And this is just the picture of the same density in different forms. And just we know that one of them is remarkably different in terms of human scale. And I wanted to test this. Can this be right? That we could actually build a city like 4 or 5 stories, and it would be just as dense as the tall buildings. So I did a test with this very advanced system. So this is the 4-story city, 50, 60-meter blocks. If we do big blocks, big quarters, then you have to build it higher. We have to go up to 7 or 8 stories with the same number of bricks. You can try it yourself. If you want to build these kind of concrete slab blocks, you have to go up to 12 stories, same space. And you know, you need to get the light in, or you can do a tower, 36 stories, maybe 22 stories. But what we know is this one does more. This scale gives us a more human scale. So if we were to choose which one gives us more ground floor, the valuable ground floor, which is worth 25% extra, every apartment, every apartment here on the top floor can be a penthouse. And it doesn't need to look like this kind of, I don't know, Russian haircut. You know, we can make it varied heights. We can make it more playful, and we can give lots of work to Danish, Scottish, and Estonian architects to make interesting buildings in a soft city. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. I think we're doing good on time and economical, so we can proceed to the next part, where I will talk for a few minutes about this project that I've been working on with the Danish Cultural Institute for the past 3 to 7 years. Depends how you measure. So, is it okay? It's green, then it's on, I suppose. Yes. So again, I'm Emil Srode. I am originally not an architect. I'm by education economist and management specialist. I have my MBA degree, so I sort of drifted into these questions of design and urban planning, not by accident, but by interest. I really got interested in these topics. So for the past maybe 15 years or so, I've been interested and increasingly working with these things. And back in year 2004, some friend gave me a report about Riga, so discussing the public spaces and sort of squares and how they could be improved. And the author was Jan Gale. And I thought, well, it's a pretty good report. We need something like this. But who is Jan Gale? And I would argue that was probably Jan Gale's first international commission, even before this London commission, which is listed on the website, but Riga is not somehow. But anyway, that's history. But for the present, there's urban cultural planning, which I just want to give a brief introduction. So it is, for the past 3 years, it's a project supported by EU Interreg program. We have 14 partners in 9 countries around the Baltic Sea, and among them Russia as well, which is not an EU member, but it is participating in this program. And we've been working with these basically 7 cities, and we are working with the concept of cultural planning as a method of urban social innovation. So somehow we are linking to this good city paradigm, but I would say from a different angle. So the cultural planning method or sort of approach, it actually goes back to 1980s, and it originates in Scotland, apparently. So Glasgow, the docks, the Govan shipyards, I'm told, that's where it all started. So you see how connected we are in this northern region, where some local activists, they were protesting that these shipyards be developed into some, bland apartments for rich people, but instead they wanted to preserve the cultural and historical values that date back hundreds of years, and thus cultural planning was born. So in this project, we are relying on this paradigm, and we tested it in 10 neighborhoods in the 7 partner cities in the Baltic Sea region. And the approach has been neighborhood scale. So very hyper-local, you could say, communities up to 20,000 people. And usually these have been sort of marginalized communities, geographically cut off from the city, or kind of ghettoized, you could say, or with large immigrant population who maybe don't speak the national language or economically are disadvantaged. So what we have been trying to do is reactivate these neighborhoods through an injection of creative energies by bringing creative people, artists, or sociologists or architects to make some sort of interventions and to connect with local people and to get them interested and to become involved in their neighborhood life. So yeah, because also the political participation in these neighborhoods, usually it's really low. People just don't vote because they don't see the point. So we've been doing this experiment for the last 3 years, but supported by EU funding, and we've had 3 international conferences and some 10 urban labs to exchange experience with our partners, and now we are approaching sort of the finishing line. We have officially closed the project activities, and now it's the reporting and sort of the mundane stuff, collecting the reports and reporting back to the program, but also assessing what we have done. And we are producing an exhibition which will be easily packageable and transportable and traveling. So we hope to make the tour and to share what we have learned with this project. So maybe at this point, then we can show the film about urban cultural planning, which is only a few minutes long, but which will tell you all about it.
It's not a physical science, but a human science. There are no simple solutions. Urbanism is a cyclic, cumulative and ever-moving state in which the emotional condition of a community is just as important as the infrastructural state of this community. These days, artists and the cultural sector are more socially aware and are re-engaging within societies, while traditional cultural institutions are taking new roles. The reality is complex, so pure planning and pure arts management are simply insufficient. Cultural planning creates a 3-way partnership between a city, its community and art. Cultural planning replaces various aspects of a sorted city. Transport becomes communication, housing, living, space, place. Cultural planning can be a formal methodology scenario based on a city, a local approach, an extended cultural sector approach. While preparing for the cultural planning process, you need to consider several points. Size of an area. Cultural planning can be used on different scales. Structure. The more informal, independent, the more flexible cooperation. Connectivity. The more connected to the political and management structure, the more useful. Specificity. Cultural planning must be adapted to local conditions and requirements. Resources. Engaging civil society, universities, schools, artistic and cultural partners, neighboring organizations. It secures participation and long-term ownership. Time frame. Optimal time frame is 6 to 21 months. To protect, nurture and develop social cultural processes, you need to provide a mandate by entering partnership that build your legal and organizational capacity. You would activate city resources, ease bureaucracy to connect them to the city, creating interdepartment links, relations with developers and access to budgets. For the whole duration of the process, you have to pay attention to communication and promotion via different media. Regular meetings, ongoing evaluation and mentoring ensure active participation and support the process. Take advantage of the opportunities for long-term projects upscaling by making them more open and inclusive. Usually there are 5 phases of cultural planning: cultural mapping, visioning, designing, implementation, diffusion. Each phase has a unique value. At every point of this process, you should provide feedback to participants and partners and inform stakeholders. While designing your process, you can choose from a wide range of methods described in the Urban Toolkit that you can find at urbantoolkit.eu. The first stage. Mapping provides methodology for interpreting the city through the lenses of the collective. It gives you a 360-degree view on how the place works. This phase brings fresh perspectives and new stakeholders to the planning process, providing non-hierarchical ways to share what should change there and connecting it to strategic planning. Visioning gives a common imagination to new, unusual perspectives on the place, helps to discover extraordinary abstract materials and gives direction to design the future based on values, hopes and concerns. Designing is a co-creative process of making use of rediscovered resources, physical, human, symbolic, for long-term benefit of all. Experts, artists, architects and citizens work intensely together. They learn and create. Cultural planning processes create legitimate platform for strategies based on information on multiple levels and in different languages. Mapped resources, people, places and structures. Cross-sector networks builds trust and strong local endorsement. Raised level of interest in culture in the city by tailoring engaged cultural program of relevant, progressive projects. It kickstarts change while taking manageable risks.
Thank you. And we are back. So now at this point, we proceed to the panel discussion. And I invite my fellow panelists, Yoko and David, to join me on this stage. And we have to bring our apologies that Madame Madle Lippus, who is Deputy Mayor of Tallinn, she was not able to come to this panel because of some last-minute conflict of time, but she was willing to come, so our apologies. So it will be the 3 of us, and just to introduce the topic, so the discussion is how do we build denser, more diverse and better cities? And it is the 3 of us here, but we also have some guests in the audience who we would now invite to say a few words. And we have these 3 gentlemen. Andro Mand, who's chairman of the board of Estonian Association of Architects. Would you like to say a brief statement, just a few minutes to react?
Short statement. Madam Ambassador, Yoko, David, and guests, I'm really honored to be here because as the head of the Estonian Association of Architects, it's my everyday's work to convince and to change the minds of our local politicians and decision makers. And now I have one more tool to use. And Jankel and David Sims said that our cities have to be designed for people. And I would add one crucial thing, that books have to be written for people, not only for the highly educated city planners and scientists and so on, because those highly educated city planners, they are not making the decisions in our cities. The politicians are making the decisions. And through this, how to say, soft influence, through this book, Soft Cities, it's much more easier to convince them. And I would say that well, I have had many meetings and conversations with our politicians, and sometimes, not always, sometimes they said that, you know what, that I'm a bit familiar with this topic because he or she has read the book Cities for People. And I hope, well, actually, I'm convinced that the book called Soft Cities will have the same impact to our politicians and decision makers as the Yoko's previous book. So thank you once more for this wonderful book. And I hope that we will see the results soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Andro, for this short but important input. Then we have Ardi Roosima, member of the management board of Estonian real estate company. So please, Ardi.
Yes, thank you. I'm very much honored as well. Your Excellency and everybody, and David and Yoko, you've done a great job. My part here is from the side of developers, and I would say it's a materialist world. And we have a constant clash of creativity, money, and administrative power. And this is where we need easy handbooks like this one to have pictures and you know, graphics, how the things should work. And I really do appreciate that it happened. So so we are in the middle of life getting more and more fast all the time. People are thinking fast and nobody wants to stop down. And when you go to the city environment that brings you along with the fast cars and fast moving information, it makes you forget about the surrounding environment. But actually, when you walk the streets, nobody really cares to think what makes you feel good or what makes you feel bad. And usually it's tension and speed and need of instant decisions and a stress. And then there are environments that really calm you down. When you go to your summer house, it's something you appreciate because time stops, but life still goes on. So the ideas like the soft city help to make the time stop. And when time stops, we can do so much more because it has to stop down gradually. So I really thank you. It's a very big honor to be here. We are constantly inside our association thinking towards a better city environment, try to do things. Yes, it's difficult. It's capitalism, and when developers come in, the clock gets ticking because the money, it has a cost. So as much as we wanted to do good environments, we're always under time pressure. And if you really can bring it forward, make from the city side and the politician sides things happening and forward-looking plans to come to life, then we are just glad to enforce them. We do have the resources and we do have a knowledge of the technical part of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ardi, for this input. And last but not least, Bertel Peter Pere, who is member of Tallinn City Council, architect and cycling transport promoter.
Thanks very much, Madam Ambassador, dear all. I like the book very much, so thanks very much. I want to, as the last person speaking, talk about the weather, because we just recently had heavy snowfall, which is unique for this time of year. Now, as some of you may have noticed, things got quieter in the city, literally. It became quiet. It became calmer because of the noise, because of cars slowing down, because you needed to, because there's lots of snow. So all of this changed suddenly by divine intervention. Now, this can be done by human design, as we have seen and will learn in the panel discussion. So slowing things down, that is one thing that can happen. The effect that we just felt walking around in this city on Sunday already, but also on Monday and Tuesday, in the everyday dark November and December mornings and evenings, this can be designed, this can be made into reality with cars driving 40 kilometers an hour or 30, giving the chance for people to walk safely, kids to go to school safely, and so on. Beyond that, I think to design a city for people, to design a soft city in this unforgiving environment, both me thinking about the weather and the people who can be very often unforgiving here too, soft is a particularly good message, I think, from that point of view too. So things take time and money, that's oxygen, we cannot escape that reality. But it's great to see in the book exactly those aspects being very specifically addressed. If you build ground floors, if you do that 1-2 meter perimeter for ground floor apartments or cafes, you get 25% more real estate value. There you go. That's the incentive. That's the business case. So there is life and there's money to be made out of a soft city. So read it as your bedtime book or in the morning, however you see fit. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bertel Peter. So now we are back to the panel. And again, the topic of the panel, I will remind ourselves and our audience, how do we build denser, more diverse and better cities? And really thank you, the three wise gentlemen, for your inputs. I mean, you have made very good connections of the topic to money and to nature, to the weather, which are very much the realities of urban life in which we are operating. You know, it's not an ideal city in the sky, it's a city in the real world that we are building and making better. So then let me maybe start with these questions I have prepared as I was reflecting on the topic. So can we just make any city a soft city, or are there some preconditions? Must there be some hard things in place to soften it? So maybe David, you can start, and then Yoko.
Is this on? Okay, right. That's a very good question, a very pertinent question. I think some cities are easier than others. I think there are some prerequisites. And I think, first of all, you probably need a balance between what I would call hardware and software. So it's not just about, and I think maybe in the design profession, we're very focused on the physical things, but the software, the will, the interest, the open-mindedness, that's an important starting point. And then there's a legal structure. Is there any money? A lot of the things we're talking about are maybe not so expensive, but they're not free. And I mean, there's a whole subject we could probably talk about, maybe soft capitalism. It's another subject we might talk about. But there's a whole range of, I think, kind of software cultural aspects. We talked about cultural planning. Those things need to be lined up before we start. And I think having a debate is an important part too, to be able to discuss things. And a big part, I think, of what Jan tried to do with the office was to try and get some facts, because everybody has an opinion. Everybody, knows, I know it's terrible. I can't find a parking space. The city's terrible. But do we have any facts? And Jan goes out and measures. because the city and the engineering office, the traffic office, they know everything about the traffic in the street. But do they know how children walk to school? Do they know how difficult it is for a grandmother to deal with the snow in the city when she's walking? Maybe she can't take a taxi. I think that's an Estonian joke. But what do we know about those things? So having a base of facts. So for example, when Gail worked in New York, which was a very hard city, Times Square, now we didn't invent the idea to make Times Square a pedestrian space, to make Broadway more friendly. People have been talking about that for like 50 years, ever since Target started. Couldn't we do this in New York? But to make that happen, you had to make a will to make it happen. And so, for example, we started collecting data and information, and we discovered that Times Square, most famous square in the world, 90% of the surface of Times Square was carriageway, it was for cars. And only 10% of Times Square was pavement for people. But 90% of the people using Times Square were pedestrians. So 90% of the people were on 10% of the land. And suddenly we've got a debate, because any journalist or a politician can put that in a speech, a journalist can put that in an article and say, hey, this is crazy. We're doing this wrong. 90% of the people on 10% of the space. And I think pretty much any street in the city you can do. And so you start a debate, you start a discussion, and that can be a starting point. And then there's a whole range of things could happen. That's what we can talk about for the next 4 hours, is about how you start setting those things in motion.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing is that will and understanding and knowing that it's possible and having something to talk about. And I guess that's what we're doing now.
Yeah, thank you, David. So, Yoko, do you want to respond to this question?
Yes, for sure. I think maybe sometimes I have almost thought that things need to get really bad before we start to make a change. So in a way, I think the worse the experience, the better, because it's actually about the awareness. And maybe you get aware of the experience once it's really bad. We have some developers with us here today. Also, I think maybe the problem so far has been also that everything gets bought, at least it looks so from if you look from the outside. But also now when we take in sustainability, I think things are starting to get that bad that we are realizing we really need to do something. And in the process of becoming more sustainable, we have a chance now to put in more quality and bring back the experience of living, the physical experience of living, and putting an awareness to that experience. If we are not anymore, also there is a saying in Tallinn that it's when it comes to urban mobility, it's just as uncomfortable in using any mode of transport. But if you are in your nice, maybe let's say Volvo, then you are being, you're made numb by the niceness of the car. You can put your favorite music on and you can just take away the experience that you are actually having. So maybe that for me, what it comes down to is the actual awareness of your experience. And like David says, we all have 24 hours a day. We all have a couple of years to live, or some years to live. We have this life. And I think the more moments we can be aware of, the richer that life actually is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, if I can just jump in there. I think that was so good. And also with Berto's remarks about the weather, when it gets worse, but somehow, even when it's terrible weather, but actually it's wonderful weather. And suddenly the crisis, the traffic's slowing down is fantastic. And I think there's something and a big advantage we have in these northern countries that we live in, because actually talk about climate change. We have climate change every year, and this thing about adapting to the weather. And in every, I think, Scandinavian language, at least, there's a saying, no such thing as bad weather, only the wrong clothes.
Yeah.
And that's important too, because, and I think that's that connection to the weather and seeing you can turn it to your advantage. And we were in Tartu yesterday and we're talking about, maybe they should take the snow off the sidewalk. And saying, well, actually, no, because this is nice for the mothers with the sledge and the children can go there. So there's always kind of an advantage And I wonder if this relationship with the weather is also why in the Nordic countries we're so progressive on climate change, because we can see the potential in that climate crisis. There's also a potential. And so we can make something happen.
We are forced to be aware of the experience, because actually people are, we are people with our senses. We have the sense of temperature, the sense of smell, the sense of hearing, the sense of touch, you know. So maybe that's what it really comes down to. Yes.
Yeah, so thank you. And speaking of people and participation, we have an online audience, and I remind our online viewers to please send in your questions. I believe through the chat function you can ask the questions and they will be conveyed to this panel. So shall we proceed? Then the next topic I have in mind, also bearing in mind the whole cultural planning perspective, which is participative, which is about getting involved in your neighborhood's affairs and physical and kind of moral climate, if you will, of it. The question is soft city and democracy or citizenship. What's the relationship there? Are we building these soft cities just building for citizens, or is there a role for the citizens to be active, to be alive, or do they only come alive when it's already built? I mean, you know where I'm going with this, but maybe you want to take this.
Well, I think that's, I mean, there's also, I mean, after I made the soft city, actually, well, there's soft capitalism, there's also soft democracy. I mean, there's many things we could add. I think this, I mean, one of the first things about writing the book, and I'm very pleased that people have picked up on this idea. It's not a book written for architects. Some architects gave some very bad reviews of the book because they thought it was a bit childish. It was a bit too simplistic, you know, and like the front cover, it looked like it was a children's book or something. And I became very aware that very often in the building process, first of all, there's a famous story by Hans Christian Andersen, you know, about the emperor's new clothes, kind of. And sometimes, you know, planning can be a bit like that, because the architect can tell the story, it's going to be fantastic, you know, wonderful, you know, and the emperor maybe sees nothing, or the emperor might be the mayor, and it sounds nice. I have no idea what he's talking about. I couldn't read any of the drawings, and very often, you know, the people who make decisions cannot read the plan, and you know, it's just like Arabic or hieroglyphics or something. And so I think if we remember that the emperor's new clothes, we've got to make it so clear that, you know, you can see this architect's naked. He's just like, he's not telling us the truth. And so I think the idea with the book was to make it very accessible, because although I have a huge respect, and anybody who comes from Scandinavia, from the Nordics, coming from Denmark, we love design. We love well-made things. Of course we do. But at the same time, we want to demystify the process. So I don't want in any way criticize my fantastic generations of colleagues, but I think it's important we make the subject accessible, that everybody is allowed to have an opinion and can understand. I think in the design question, and certainly Scandinavians have got lots of opinions, and you know, they know how to choose a good chair, you know how to choose a good window, but maybe they don't have the vocabulary or the references to talk about how to make a good city. And I think Jan was extremely good at this. And a lot of the things Jan said, you read Jan's book, you think, well, I knew that already, but Jan helped give me words for it. And I think maybe a lot of the things in the book, I mean, I'm not a writer, I'm a practicing architect, and I got frustrated because every time I met a new developer, I was telling the same thing again and again. And so I thought maybe I could write it down. And so I had this file in the office with all this really basic stuff. And it was called like the shit that works. And it was just kind of like, and those were the things I would, you know, it's not a very good title for a book, but those were the things. And when we were making it, I thought, this is so simple, walk straight in. Can I even put this in the book? It's so simple. But the idea was that if we can give this simple vocabulary, we already, like, we know it from design. People know how design works. If we can demystify urbanism as well, then we can have much smarter debates. So I guess the first part of the answer, sorry, this is a very long answer, but it's to demystify the question so that everybody feels qualified. And I think it's happening now, and especially in Copenhagen, people understand the difference that those little continuous pavements make. They know the value of the bike lanes. I mean, I think every Copenhagener is an ambassador of the bike lane. You know, those back courtyards, you know, you should make it, oh, this makes sense. And then it also means people are more open-minded to change. Because if you give them like really good common sense change, they've given me a much better way to get to work. They've given me a great way for my kids to walk to school. You've given us a great backyard. I think I trust these planners. I think they've got some good ideas. And so I think that's the other thing, is to make it accessible and to create trust. That's been starting, but I've talked enough now, so.
Yeah, so thank you, David. So Yoko, as a lawmaker and democratically elected representative of the people, how do you connect the good city, the soft city, and democracy and citizenship?
Well, I basically think David gave you the answer to that, but I think definitely it's about creating equal opportunities to participate in this space making process. You know, maybe in the modernist time, the architect had this high hat and looked from like an aerial view. This is the area where we're going to develop something, and some kind of space, really cool architectural object landed in the middle of nowhere, you know, a little bit. But again, we are really, I think what David, you are doing, you are reminding us of this, exactly like you say, when you read it, you feel like, oh my God, I know this. But, you know, for example, this, what you talk about, the microclimate, I think also someone mentioned the summer cottage. And when I thought how to present this book to the Estonian people, also, many of us live in the cities and we are only longing for Friday to get away, to get to our cottage, because that's where life really happens, you know. But what is it really that we value there in the cottage when we start to think about it? For example, I have this spot where already in April I can get a suntan, you know. And it's exactly because of that microclimate. The house is placed so that the wind, I'm protected from the wind, from the right direction. The sun shines, my back is protected, like Jan says. We want to have the soft edge, you know, we want to be protected on our backside, and we want to maybe have some plants, some little pieces of furniture, and we just feel good there. And that's what it's about. We get these in-between spaces, in between outdoors and indoors. We maybe also have a place in the community where we have our summer cottage. We know the neighbors. We can bring all these experiences into the city environment. This is the way we can live also in the city. And I think exactly about the democracy as well. It's about your experiences. It's not about some law, you know. It's about your everyday life, your decisions. Which school do you want to put your kids in? Can they actually walk there? Maybe when you start to make these decisions also more awarely, exactly, we can have more of a debate. You know, we're in this together.
Yeah. I think, sorry, just this thing, it's about being relevant. This relevance in finding those connectors. I think the summer house one is really a great example, because that's when people choose to live a much more primitive life, much more basic, but it's wonderful, like not having a TV and not having a dishwasher. It's simpler, more basic life. So I think that's a really great example. So just about being relevant.
Okay, well, thank you. And to so how are we doing with the questions from audience? Is there any coming in? Not yet. Well, you have to be more brave, people in the online audience.
I have a question with the democracy and accessibility. People go to the summer cottage, many don't have one. So if it's Saturday, I want to go out, or somebody wants to go out, they don't have a summer cottage or a car to drive somewhere, they should be able to, everybody has the democratic right to go to the park or let their kids go out, come back in 2 hours, come back by supper. So you need all of that infrastructure, all of that safety. So segregation, I wanted to ask you about that. How does the soft city approach, describe and help to solve segregation in these terms?
Well, if I can maybe start, and I think it was good to have that connection to the summer cottage, because there's something about becoming aware of this idea of being on holiday, those moments. And I guess maybe the first place that kind of happened was Nyhavn in Copenhagen, which was a very sunny microclimate. And it was actually a dangerous kind of dirty car park with some sailors getting drunk. And then they took some of the parked cars away and they discovered the microclimate was perfect. And there was this place which kind of had a kind of a holiday feeling, even on anyway, like, you know, in the city. And this idea, you didn't need to go to Paris or to Malaga to have a cup of coffee and under an umbrella. You could do that in Copenhagen. And that shift, that you could have this holiday feeling in everyday life. And what was great, what happened in New Haven, of course, you see, but these are restaurants, and they were, you know, they were rich Estonian tourists drinking, you know, the most expensive glass of wine they've ever had. But actually, if you go to New Haven, there are people under the umbrellas, but under the same edge, there's the local Danes, and they went to the Kirkman, the local shop, and they bought 6 beers, and they sit on the edge, and it's the same sunshine, and it's the same water, it's the same music, and everybody's in the same space. And that's actually kind of almost practicing democracy, when different people, different economic backgrounds use the same space. And actually, the restaurant owners were a bit nervous at the beginning because they took away the parking spaces. But, you know, when you go on a date, you know, it's much nicer with your date sitting, like you're sitting under the umbrella with your expensive Chardonnay. And rather than looking at a row of cars, you say, oh, look at the funny fat Danish man, he's so drunk. You know, he's going to fall in the water, you know, and that's much more interesting. Is that the Mark III Mercedes or the Mark IV? You know, so it's more interesting to look at people, you know, and so this kind of bringing people together. And I think this democratization of public space, that making it more and more about a better everyday life. I mean, one of the great things was Plot, who then became big, created this harbor bath in Copenhagen. And of course, that was the top of the iceberg of cleaning up the harbor and making it, but by making the water clean enough to swim in, and suddenly it doesn't matter, you don't need to go on holiday, you don't have a car, but you can go for a swim every morning in the city and it costs you nothing. And it's very soft to meet your neighbor in their bathing costume. It's, you know, it's very kind of democratic, you know, and it makes things accessible. And I think, you know, I mean, sometimes you think, well, but, you know, Denmark's a very rich country, like, you know, we can't be like them. But actually, so many of those things which have made life better are actually very cheap things, like bike lanes and walking streets and benches and a wooden platform that allows you to jump into the water. These are really simple things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, totally agree. And I must admit that going also for a winter swim and that swimming all year around in Tallinn, we have actually great possibilities for this, and you meet the most interesting people there from all fields of life, and you are all equal, because when you go into the freezing water, you are just there. So, but what it's about, I think what you actually, David, give the tools for in your book is also defining the private and defining the public and defining the semi-public. And that's when you also help people to feel comfortable about using these spaces, whether to use the private space for actually creating your own identity, having your own front door, having a little bit of space outside of your front door where you can be with your immediate family or your friends. Then there is the next layer, maybe the shared back garden, you know, or the street space. It's about giving, writing these signals in the space by designing it the right way. Then people feel also comfortable about using this. Because sometimes we, when we haven't defined this, and maybe that sometimes happens with like this kind of modernistic, like we have also the big blockhouse areas in Tallinn, the Lasnamäe, Mustamäe, actually the spaces are not defined. The only private space is inside the flat, and the rest is nobody knows who's or what's happening, you know. So about giving back information to space by designing it, which makes the use of it somehow feel comfortable.
And if I can just add to that, that's a really good point. And I think the smartest thing that came, I mean, in Denmark, they had these block housing estates as well. You know, so it's the same problematic architecture. And there's a lot of things we could say about that. But a key thing was in the 70s, in this Jan Gehl time, they developed something called Denslow. And it was a recognition of both and, which you could say it in Danish. And that's, you need both to be private. I need my own front door and my letterbox and my pot of flowers, and I feel my own place, but I also need community. I need both things. And I think this is the smart, kind of soft, maybe Danish compromise of both and. both, yes, I'm a private individual, but I'm also part of a community. And we need to build the city with both of those things. The support, respect the private, but also respect that need for community spaces and places.
Yep. So, yeah, the city is there. It is sort of, there's a private sphere, but there's also the sort of no man's land, you know, the streets, the pavements, the beaches, the parks, the forests. So, yeah, it's a question what we can do to make, to add the soft touch, you know, to make the beach more accessible, maybe build a ramp or a
From a no man's
walkway
land to everyone's land.
well,
maybe.
or citizens forest, you know, something like this. So, but it does not, you know, it's not a simple jump from no man's to every man's. It's more, you really have to design these nudges and pathways and kind of these small signs that tell you that you're welcome and you are welcome to use it in a certain way, but not in another maybe sort of way which is less desirable. So it's about design in the end. So, and I hear there is a question, or no, it disappeared. Or there is a question in the audience. There is. So, Madam Ambassador.
Yes, thank you very much. And it's so inspiring, and I'm also known for talking a lot. So I am really trying to limit myself here, but I do have a comment and a question. So Pertel Peter Perre, we have a distinguished member of the City Council here actually in this embassy who knows a lot about biking. So I'll come back to you, but first the comment, and it's about biking in Tallinn. So you can prepare. And my comment is about how few square meters we actually need as human beings to have a good time. It was very inspiring what you both said, both David and Yoko, about how little time we have, and how time is our biggest or most valuable commodity that we have, and no matter how much money you have, you don't have more time than anybody else. Actually, you often have less. The few square meters that we need are, as Yoko said, it's probably something about being protected. It's a little bit warm there. You have a few pots and plants. You might have a cup of coffee, and that's really what many human beings need in order to have a good life. And when I was in Paris, you mentioned Paris before, David. I was posted in Paris for 4 years, and it's a magnificent, grand city. The best time I had was actually not at the Louvre, where I spent a lot of hours. The best time I had was on my very small balcony, couple of square meters in total, on Boulevard Saint-Germain, where I could feel this was my little private place. I was proud I was there. And I had my community just down on the street. I could look at the Mercedes, Ferraris at nighttime. They would be racing back and forth. And I had my little coffee there, and it cost me 30 cents from Nespresso. And at the cafe downstairs, I could see those, people drinking coffee for €5.50 at Boulevard, at the Café de Flore here on Boulevard Saint-Germain. So anyway, my small square meters. But you don't need to go to Paris, as you said. You don't need to go to Malaga to enjoy this. You can do it in a little microclimate that you can create in your summer house or in your apartment at home, or just outside your apartment. Here in this embassy designed by Lundgaard and Tranberg from the Danish architectural firm, we have a courtyard out there. It looks a bit hard, not that soft, but actually we have created small spots of softness, and it's a microclimate. It's probably the warmest place in Tallinn. So already in March, if you long for sunbathing, please come over, Yoko. It's actually possible here, and in March already, when the sun is shining. We have our own microclimate. Getting back to the question, you've had time to prepare, but you don't know what I will ask. So I just want to refer to the fact that 2 years ago, when Tallinn City had an inspirational day, Tarek, who was then head of the city council, called me and asked, "Can you provide somebody who knows something about bikes?" And I said, of course we can. We have specialists in Denmark. So we invited the professor called Malene Freund Petersen. She came over, and she had been part of city planning and biking planning in Copenhagen. Now she was an academic, providing information to others. She came and she spoke at this Tallinn City Day, inspirational day. One of the things I really noted was about snow, and Peter, you actually mentioned the snow, how soft it is, but it's also creating problems for bicycles. So she said the most important thing in Copenhagen in terms of getting people to use their bikes in winter was to clear the pathways first. The bike lanes were the first to be cleared. After that, then you would clear the roads for the cars. I thought that was extremely smart, and it had apparently got people to take their bike because the cycle lane was already cleared. Do you have, I mean, this inspiration came from the stage 2 years ago. Is that something that you have remembered in the city council, or how is it going with the city bike planning?
I'm a proud member of the opposition in Tallinn, so it's going good. This year, the municipality here, which has been run by one single party, never mind the color, but that same party that listened to that presentation 2 years ago, this year they finally started talking about that the bicycle is a means of transport, not something that you do on a Saturday in a park. So this dramatic shift has finally happened. Snow, yes, it needs to be cleaned, and Helsinki is doing the same, and it makes sense because people need to get to work. That's the end of the conversation. Snow, is it an obstacle here? Not yet, because the bike paths, the beginnings of the bike paths we have now, are not being used anyway because the roads are too dangerous for them because cars drive 60 kilometers an hour. So if you bike on the pavement for pedestrians, that's more or less cleared anyway. And since the rest of the city is calmer because cars need to drive a bit slower, all in all, snow actually, I would say, helps right now. We don't have any bike paths to clear snow from, so it's not really a very big issue. Of course, those places where we have bike paths, they should be cleaned. Some of them are cleaned, sure. So the city should continue doing that. But the snow is, I would say, right now, not an obstacle.
Yeah, I think the point Bertel wants to make is to clear the snow out of the bike path. First, you need the bike paths. So first we need to get there, but I totally agree that actually the shift is happening. And you know, the shift is also happening from grassroots level. Actually, the use of the bike is happening. There is a huge rise in the use. People are demanding these bikes. It's becoming so dangerous. I mean, nobody wants people to, also the politicians don't want people to just keep dying in traffic. So the situation is so bad that we are realizing we need to change the experience. These red carpets that were put down for bikes on the pedestrian roads, it's a start. But we need to move forward, of course, and have the actual bike paths, which also David has shown a perfect design of in the book.
Could I just, a very small additional question. Is there anything that we could do from Denmark in terms of getting more inspiration, bike lane planners to come over and cooperate? Please let me know, and we will talk with Emil Sorota. We will also talk to the Danish Cultural Institute if there is something we can do in terms of, you know, meetings between city planners, whatever you might think we could be useful in. We would love to help.
The transport department.
And with these words, I will actually move the bike a little bit more into the center of the stage, because I think that the softness of a city actually has a lot to do with bikes. So here we go.
If I could just add, because I'm really happy you told the bike clearing story about the snow. That's one of my favorite stories from Copenhagen. The other one I always tell is for the guys who are selling apartments and selling the property in the city. A game changer, like in Gale and Copenhagen, we're very interested in numbers, and we're doing research all the time to prove that we know what we're doing. And the first one is we do this bicycle account every 2 years, and I really recommend you look at that. And one of the great things we discovered the first time we did this bicycle account, it was a very detailed interview with citizens to find out why they cycled. And we say, do you cycle because you care about the environment? Only 1% said they cycled because they cared about the environment. Do you cycle to save money? Only 6%. It's a rich country. Do you cycle for health reasons? 19, almost 20%. It's my body. You know, I've got to think about the beach and that swimming. Do you cycle because it's easy? And more than 60% said they cycled because it was easy and convenient. So it's really good to get this kind of like this data. And the best thing we've discovered now is there have been discoveries about a very detailed study in Copenhagen about academic performance of children, regardless of social economic background. Children that walk and cycle to school have a better academic performance than children that are driven to school. And this is really like the whole middle class is like aware, like if you drive your kids to school, you're a bad parent. And I think it's really important, like when the middle class, the ones who are buying apartments in the New Year's, they start thinking about those things. That's when it becomes super relevant. It's not some like weird kind of like hippie crazy idea. These are really things which kind of like go to the core of the things that we may care most about.
Yeah.
I have a question. Can I? Because I'm listening it, and I actually have to say, I just comment. I brought this material thing with the intention, because we always go against that, and then we see things. Yes, the changes are happening on a grass level, so to say, and we see it in a cities. But it pains me to see how much the material things are brought into our lives. For instance, late media about removing the trash bins and the stops from the highways because it's too expensive for the state. And then we spend money and we could do the traffic lanes 10 centimeters narrower to keep this money to serve and then to make the community more comfortable, because it's not about just bikes, it's about garbage bins, it's about benches, it's about all these things, and it really does pain me, because we're thinking about the better environment all the time. We're developers, we want to do a good thing, and everything doesn't get sold. There are things that really don't sell eventually, and yes, they get sold at the good times, but at the bad times you really have to think. And the bad times you need help from the state, from the local governments, etc., etc. And I really have a feeling that from the state side, the messages are controversial, and in many cases, like this I mentioned with the highways right now, it's just plain wrong. You couldn't even say these things. What can be done at the state level? It's a question to you, Jakob, because you see it from the inside. What could be done to change the mindset? Because this is where people take their own opinions at first.
Well, like I said, I believe that we are in this together. The more, I mean, that's why I invited Bertel Peter into our party, and now he's a city councillor. Just go in there, you know. It's we are on the same side, all of us, actually. And I think definitely that was a very wrong message that was sent by that decision. It was also sent by our how it's called, Maanteamet, you know. It also shows it starts with values. Do we value the machine that is cleaning the streets and design the experience after that machine? Or do we design the street after the person who is going to use it? That's what it comes down to, actually, about this. And almost I have this feeling today when we talk about the softness of it all. That's not even soft, that's life, you know, and life has all these aspects to it. And the most of our life is actually about this. Is there a place to go and pee, or is there not? That's how easy it is, you know. So definitely I invite you all, come and do it from that inside if you wish, but also do it from the outside. I mean, it's about, it doesn't matter from which position you are doing these things. It should be more about what you are doing. So, and also stressing that that was wrong. That's the thing to do also. That's also showing your values. So absolutely.
I'm really happy you talked about rubbish, because this is the reality of things. I mean, it's not always sexy, exciting projects. I can tell you, just like this is what all the good news. There was a full page in the Danish national newspaper Politiken, the review of my book, and it was actually a Swedish journalist, so we can blame Sweden. And it was a whole page, and the headline was, if this book was a city, it would be really boring. And I gave 2 of 6 stars. And this was, and the journalist was showing, oh, this is so boring, because he wanted big architecture and exciting stuff and provocative stuff. And this boring little Scotsman was talking about trash and opening the window to have a good night's sleep and children playing in the backyard, and it's so boring. And I think we have to recognize that so much of what we do is actually quite boring. It's not super exciting rocket science, but it's lots of little careful things. And I guess there's one word I'm sure everybody in Estonia now knows about, hygge. Like this little bit of care, like the cup of coffee. I mean, it was so nice here. Somebody just brought me this nice Danish cup, and it's been designed soft, so it's very hot inside, but I can feel the warmth. Just taking care of those little things. And actually the world is okay. And I think that's something to think about, the smallness of stuff, is we take care of the small stuff. And like taking care of the rubbish, like the, you know, I mean, actually there was one subject I wanted to write about public toilets in the book, in the chapter about mobility, because that's part of the package of getting around. And the American publisher thought, no, that's inappropriate, you know. But there's lots of subjects which are not sexy and exciting, but they're very important to make a good city.
Yeah, so speaking of things which are not very exciting, okay, let's take it from there. So I want to take this angle that city is, in a way, of course, it's soft and humanistic and unpredictable, and has all kinds of fashions and fads, and it's changing, but it's also built on regulations and rules. And a lot of what you do at Gale is actually working with these rules and regulations, and, you know, widths of sidewalks and, you know, stalls for pavement trading or what have you. So and I'm actually curious, your title is called creative director. So how do you reconcile this creative side and yet the very rigid city structures, you know, the rules, regulations, requirements that cities have?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and I don't know if I've got a quick answer, but a really important thing is that very often, it's very good that we recognize the city officers, the ones who are not elected, and they're the ones who have to year in and year out to take care of those things. I think it's important the way they're organized. And I thought the little film was very good to talk about this more cultural approach to planning, that we shouldn't just think about the silo, which is called traffic, and the silo, which is called parks, that everybody needs to sort of speak to each other, and we design the street together so that this machine that cleans the street isn't deciding everything. And so we start by having meetings where we invite everybody to the meeting from the start. So we respect, like, you know, Mr. Trash Can and Mrs. Light Thing, you know, we bring everybody to the meeting, and so that they can feel respected, and then we can find solutions together. But I think maybe we also have to go back to the politicians, because it's very important that the city officers are supported by the politicians, because they have the position of interpreting the rules. Right. And in Copenhagen, there are lots of rules. It's not free for all. Now, if you put your chairs and table on the street, there's a rule for that, and you have to fill in some forms. And if you want to put the soft edge, some products from the shop on the street, you have to make a little drawing and send it to the city office to get approval. So there is control, but it's important that empowering the officers, that they can interpret the rules in a soft way where it makes sense. Like, this is a sunny corner. Of course, it makes sense to have some tables and chairs there. We'd be such a bad city if we didn't let that happen. You know, and then maybe in time we can plan that we'll make the pavement a little bit wider on that corner, and you can start doing those things. But I think the key thing is to empower the officers, to let them make small decisions to test, and then they get support and trust from the politicians that they can take it further.
But if I may add also a little bit of the Tallinn side, it's also important that you don't put all these creative people in one department and the rest of life just goes on as usual, you know, because that's what sometimes happened. And what I want to say is that actually, if you decide that the system should be maybe in a way that the elections are to decide which values are we going to use in this city. For example, we want to be sustainable, we want to be inclusive, we want to be, you know, have the human scale. And like, for example, you bring out in the book the rules that they made in Melbourne, actually on 1 A4. this is where the values are. And whatever department it is, whether it's transport, whether it is the greenery, whether it is, you know, financial department, they can all, this A4 is so accessible that it's possible and you can't get past it, you know.
You can maybe lift up and show it.
Yes, this is
the
yeah.
densification rules for Melbourne. Melbourne's a kind of sister city of Copenhagen, taking a lot of inspiration. So Melbourne has, you know, Copenhagen style bike lanes. One of the things for densification, they have something, and actually they call it linear Barcelona because it's a little bit higher. But on one A4 page, they've made the rules. So if you're a developer, and there are like 9 simple diagrams, and if you follow those rules, you get your planning permission today. We can let you do it start right away. We
and
trust
not in
you.
10 years.
No. Otherwise, you know, you could wait 10 years to go the other way. But if you're prepared to like follow this simple framework, you can start straight away. So you can also design, this is where creativity comes in. You can design a system which makes it easy to develop, you know, and by having a reasonable framework.
Yeah, this is what I really appreciate about your communication at Gale, that you make these complex ideas into very simple seeming diagrams and sort of very precise descriptions with words, and it's quite Danishly concise and precise and well said. Well, just to compliment you. But yeah, now, Yoko, maybe the same question, but on a national scale, because you're working on all Estonian scale. So how do you empower cities to be better cities? I mean, of course, it's abstract, but still you have to somehow make cities move in this direction.
Absolutely, and that's, I think you're touching on a very soft spot here. Another soft. We have had this discussion. I mean, in general, in Estonia, we have had this very private ownership based and very much like designing plot by plot. And we are maybe realizing now that because the common is also so important, actually the local government as the responsible body for all planning and building permits, they have a huge role. How much can we support them from the state level? Of course, a lot of this goes now actually thanks to the sustainability issue. The European money that is being flooded in has some kind of criteria, and also in the cultural ministry, this good room making policies have been actually approved, but how to then also create the capacity in the local governments to use this. So like I'm saying, for a change to happen, it needs to happen on all levels in a way. We all have a part to play in this. Yep. But obviously, what I wanted to stress also, we need to start feeling it also with our wallets. I think taking a plane, flying, driving a car, building buildings out of cement and steel, it is far too cheap at this moment. It is not reflecting the price the resource we are taking out from the planet. If we want to stop global warming at 1.5 degrees, in general, we have 500 gigatons, like balance what we can have this kind of CO2. If we look now at the building sector, the way the population is growing, only the building sector will give 900 gigatons. So this is not, we can't do it like this. How to promote the building in wood, the use of wood as a building material, we have to start to count this kind of the footstep, you know, the whole life cycle of how we build. But it starts on the planning level, densification, you know.
Yeah, so to move to another topic, which is very much present, it is, of course, the pandemic. And, you know, you published the book originally in English 2019, so kind of before, and now we're in the middle, and maybe it's ending, or maybe it's just beginning, you know. So how do we deal with this emergency city? You know, we've had the emergency situations in Riga just 2 weeks ago. We had the lift of the lockdown, which was the first total lockdown for a month that we had. Well, it's a whole other story, but I mean, it could be that we are in the middle of kind of permanent emergency city. or maybe we will go to some sort of as before state, but who knows? But what does it imply for the good city? I mean, do these things still stand as they were, or?
That's such a good question. I mean, people said to me, like, because the book came out a few months before the pandemic, and everybody said, "Oh, David, what a shame. What a shame. What bad timing. You wrote this book and it was all about hygge and those cozy things. It's over." You know, that soft convivial city thing, we're all going to move to the suburbs. We're going to drive our cars. And I was really nervous for about maybe 5 minutes because what we've discovered and what's been really significant in the pandemic time is actually living locally is more important than ever. What you can do in your building, like what happens in your building, in your street, in your little neighborhood, has become vital. And you can talk about Paris is a 15-minute city, but we can talk about a 1-minute city and a 3-minute city. Like, what can I do just in my building? You know, and because I've got a typical walk up and there are like 10 families on the stair that everybody knows each other. So we can check the old lady on the 3rd floor. Is she okay? Can we help her with her shopping? And like, we don't have to use the lift because, you know, like the pandemic, during the pandemic, the lift was kind of like Russian roulette, kind of like, you know, I don't even want to touch the buttons, you know, and then the door opens, like, I'm not getting in with you because, you know, maybe, you know, and then you get the lift to yourself and then the door opens and somebody wants to get in and suddenly we became so antisocial. But the staircase, you can do this little kind of ballet on the staircase, like, okay, you're coming through, I step back, you know, and there's a scale which allows us to operate. And then, of course, if you've got a balcony, and I think maybe if you can say, if there was one beautiful image of the pandemic, it was the Italians having like parties on their balconies, you know, and singing, having concerts. The balcony, which is a cheap little thing, made such a big difference. And then what you could do in your street, in your neighborhood, and Gail, because we're such nerds, even during the pandemic, we were making lots of notes and research, and we discovered that actually the public spaces were more valuable than ever, and especially the local ones. And maybe there were not so many people on Strøget kind of during the pandemic, but all of the local squares were really well used, and they were incredibly important. And then being able to ride your bike and be able to walk, that was really important because maybe you weren't comfortable about taking the bus. And suddenly the bike makes such total sense. So actually there were lots of things that did make sense during the pandemic. So even so this cozy city is actually quite a robust city. So we see like soft cities work well in hard times.
Well said.
Yes, definitely. I think it's the resilience of this soft city, the possibility to adapt to change. You know, change is maybe the whole. That's what's most prominent about this world we live in. Actually, it's changing very rapidly. Many people have a hard time to actually face all this change. And the soft city is designed to help us live and enjoy these changes, you know, through the environment, through the right design. Because also if there is, if the quality, if the values stay, if these things are permanent, you can trust this. Then it's okay if the outer environment changes.
I love what you said there about enjoy the change. And that's really like enjoy the snow. And I don't know, I mean, there's nothing to say, maybe I don't know if Estonians think about it, but there's something, we've used the word trust a lot. And as I understand, and that's something I've come to learn as a foreigner in the Nordics, trust is, you know, one of the most important factors, you know, in making a society that works.
I think also actually just this trust issue is maybe it's something that has to do with the age of digitalization also, that we have a little bit given away our trust towards each other, in each other, trusting people. We have given this away, trusting the phones instead. You know, we trust, you know, what we read on Facebook, but you know, it's actually, we should learn to trust each other again, maybe.
But there's something about, I'm sure like the ambassador will know this as well, but like the real strength of the Scandinavian countries especially is the Viking thing. And like, you know, why, you know, the Viking, you think the Vikings were, you know, like wild, invaders, but they were actually very sophisticated trading people. And there's three key things that I think are really important about Viking culture. One is in the Viking ship, even the captain, even the chief, he was rowing. And I think that's something very much about the culture where the bosses actually work as well, that everybody's kind of working together, like even the boss rolls up their sleeves. The second thing, I guess, is from the Viking culture, because all the men were out sailing, the women were at home making all the smart decisions about how society was run. And that tells you a lot about a very deep set culture, about making very pragmatic decision-making for very practical reasons. And the third thing was trust, because the Vikings were illiterate. They didn't have any banks, but they had trust. And when they came to Scotland, they said, okay, we're going to, we'll bring the gold, you have the horses, Tuesday, high tide, we trade. That was trust. And they had a whole trading empire from, I don't know, Istanbul to Canada, and all based on trust. And I think those things can really tell us a lot about how to make a society work today.
Just to be sure that we're in the same information space, that we were also Vikings here in Estonia. It's lately been proven by a lot of huge findings.
That makes total sense. That makes total
Definitely.
sense.
And
And I've got blue eyes. I'm a Scottish with blue eyes. So some great grandmother had some encounter, I think.
And we were Vikings as well. Yeah, we had some Viking
We're all Vikings.
settlements, and we invaded Copenhagen in the 12th century, maybe with the Saremans together, possibly. Well, but to kind of come back to this place, to Tallinn, I have a question to you, Yoko. So we are looking at Copenhagen as the most livable cities, but I mean, all cities are inventing things and are innovating. So a question to you, what do you think is Tallinn's contribution to the good city? What is one thing which is there in Tallinn? I mean, it's not Viking in the city probably yet, but maybe there's something which you think Tallinn has given to the world.
Yes, that's a very interesting question, actually. I wrote my master's thesis in 2010 in Estonian Art Academy, and I looked at the culture of disruptions and the city of Tallinn as like an archipelago. And I think in Tallinn we have this special, because we have had the wars, we have had the change of political rule. That's where the disruptions come from. You always see the politics mirrored in the space where we live. But we have a lot of these lovely islands. Like, for example, we have in the north of Tallinn now, where the old factory areas were. We have lots of lovely islands like the Telliskivi Creative City and the other islands, like, for example, Kalamaja as the neighborhood. And in between are these like, okay, you said no man's land, and maybe the pedestrians feels quite like, how am I going to move here? Or like in the harbor area, you have the Rotermanni area, which is a really nice island. But how to join these? We talked about that word, traageldama, how to like stitch up, how to create this kind of make it cohesive, make it sidusus, make it the connections, So, but actually these islands are very much flourishing. Also, I mean, our old town, again, an island, but there is the risk that if you are not able to walk in the whole of the town, and it is really nice to walk in the old town, but you're not anymore used to walking. So will you even go to the old town? So we need to really think about this, maybe. There is a huge strength in this. There is huge potential. The amount of people that actually go, for example, to this Telliskivi area and enjoy it. How to make us also think about that in-between space. Maybe that's Tallinn for me.
I mean, for me, just what I've observed in the few days I've been here is actually a very kind of soft entrepreneurship. There's a very rich entrepreneurial culture. I mean, I've been a lot in North Tallinn, which is maybe not only typical things. I mean, I know there are some more conventional things, and I guess one of the challenges was in the 90s, all those changes came and you immediately went to the mall, the big car park and the mall. And what's really great though is that I'm seeing this emerging culture of small independent operators. We've been, presenting I was also in Tartu presenting the book in an independent bookshop. And there's this flourishing independent culture of entrepreneurship, restaurants, cafes, bars, clubs, shops, manufacturers, designers. This is something that's really exciting because this is also, I think, soft. And that's also on the software side of things, because they can, even those former factories, which aren't the most soft places, become soft because they break down the scale and bring it down to a very personal level.
Yeah, great. So we are approaching the end of the panel, and now it's the time to hear questions from the audience, which I understand there are some. Yeah, so yeah, please.
And that it's still too cheap to use concrete and steel in our building process. So what we should change? I mean, do you propose that we should put extra taxes on those materials which are actually producing this huge amount of CO2?
We are putting. It's coming from Europe, we have the climate package coming. So actually, I think this is something that is very good that Europe has taken this initiative. And I think also now that we are going to present the Estonian, what we think about this package. And if we want to say that, of course, the huge amount of CO2 comes from China, from Russia, from India, from the United States. But if we do want to lead the way, we have to show that we can actually agree within Europe. So I think that's the first point, if you look at the sort of broad level, but also we need to introduce, obviously, in the public procurements, for example, in Finland, they are doing these building codes that actually you have to show the sustainability measures of the thing you are building by the year of 2025, I think. Whole of Scandinavia is doing this. Do we want to do business with Scandinavia? If we do, we need to follow the same rules. So this is something the ministry is working on. Also in the public procurements, you should also value within the procurement, you should get points for your sustainability measures. So this is another thing. So I think this whole thing of measuring is something that's becoming very, very important. This is where we need the scientists to help us to also improve this, that both the actually the people understand what choices they are making. But when it comes to using wood, it's also about scale, about how much we use. Today we use so little that still the other materials have the advantage, because if you do something big scale, of course you can optimize, But from my perspective, this is something that actually is possible to change. Also, again, referring to Finland now, they have this goal that in the year of 2025, 40% of the public buildings will be built out of wood. I mean, actually, for me, it's like embarrassing that we even build in Estonia something out of something else for public money.
Okay, and I wanted to actually add one comment. There was a question, what is really like typical or unique for Tallinn in this topic? And I would say that Tallinn is the only capital city, at least in Europe, where we have this tradition to have wooden houses in the city center. We still have those wooden districts, and also like all the new buildings in those districts. At least they have to have the wooden facade. Or unfortunately, there is usually a concrete house behind of it. But it's but still, I mean, historically, this kind of solutions used to be in Stockholm and in Helsinki as well. But we are the only capital city where we still have it, and it's this, and those are like 2 or 3 stories high. And we have this specific house type called House of Tallinn, wooden houses, stone staircase, and I guess that it will come back again.
I think it is coming back, and I think this is also what David noticed straight away when we came here, and it's very good that you say that. I'm almost blind to it, being in it all the time, but it is very special. And like in Stockholm in the 70s, they actually destroyed this, and the few houses that they do have left got this cost. So I think this is this is something good we got with actually the poverty during Soviet time, that we didn't take them down, and we really value them now. And what we value in them is actually the human scale.
But also they perform very well. The wooden houses, they perform very well in terms of insulation. Also in terms of noise. I mean, I heard some stories about some of the new apartments that you can buy €1 million apartment in Tallinn, and you can hear the neighbors having an argument because concrete and those concrete buildings are often very poor sound insulators. Wood is a fantastic insulator. And what we're discovering is that as the public, the people buy, the consumers understand the materials better, that wood is a better insulator, so I'll have lower heating bills. It will be a better sound insulator, so I'll get a better night's sleep. It's more healthy, so my children won't get allergies. All of the arguments are like building up to actually makes total sense, and even makes most of all economic sense.
Yep. So we're back to the materiality of life, because life is built of tangible things. And we do have a question from the online audience. So Kirke, would you read it, please, for us?
Yes. Firstly, thank you very much. It is really inspiring and fruitful conversation. What do you think about the role of data collection and the citizen participation during the decision-making process for the cities? And additionally, how can we enhance the interaction between citizens or creating a community by city planning?
And who is asking?
This is Nur Sultan. Nur Sultan.
Okay, so sounds Kazakh or
yes. So just saying that, I mean, I think I've already said a lot of examples that collecting data, having a base about the values, we've talked about values. When we know our values, we shouldn't just be collecting the data about traffic. We should be collecting the data about public life, about behavior, about how we walk to school, how we use public space, about the democracy of public space. So I think there are many arguments for collecting that data. And I think it maybe makes the decision easier. Very often, I mean, and I know this because I'm a creative director, and I'm saying, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we could have this wide sidewalk and there'd be cafes? And then the traffic engineer comes and says, no, my little friend, don't you know that on Hans Christian Andersen Boulevard, there are 72,000 vehicle movements every day? You know, we cannot change that. And I say, yeah, I understand that, but there are actually 160,000 pedestrian movements every day. You know, that's a bigger number. And that comes to politics, because if the traffic engineer says, no, Mr. Mayor, 75,000 vehicle movements, that's 75,000 voters, then I can come and say, yeah, 160,000 pedestrians, that's more voters. So there's something about using the data in a creative way, because you'll find that the people not in cars is always a bigger number. There are always more people outside. And so that can really help in the decision making.
Yeah, maybe if I may also, of course, in Estonia, we are known for all our digital advancement. And we have had this discussion many times with David about how to join the smart city and the soft city, because the digital solutions should be actually something we use for the values, for the soft elements. So you need both of them. You can definitely use a lot of the data if you know which questions to ask, but if you don't know from the value-based approach, then also sometimes it seems like the smart city becomes a thing in its own. It shouldn't do that. I think we are just learning to use this, but of course there is a lot of development to be had. For example, if you take our one Estonian company, a huge platform of car sharing, electric bikes, also you can order food. This is all one company owning a lot of data, which could be used, for example, for real city planning. You know, if you want to really know where the people go, because on the Tallinn trams and buses, you can only see where they are going, where there already are lines. What about the rest of the movement? Because we know that actually the typical working person very often doesn't use the public transit, but where is he or she going? We can find that out there from there. So how to, I think the soft and the smart should complement each other.
And very, very simple things. I mean, a simple example would be having this real-time information at the bus stop. the bus is coming in 5 minutes or 3 minutes. And if you know how much time you've got, I've got time to buy a newspaper, I've got time to have a coffee, or I can say, oh, the next bus is coming in 30 minutes, I shall have a coffee and I'll take the next one. So really simple things connect a digital experience to an analog experience. And I've actually forgotten there was a second half of the question. Citizen involvement. And I think there are lots of things we can do to bring people, make it relevant. And I wish I had the pictures now. I promise I'll show them tonight. We had a project in France, in Lille, which was very difficult to explain because it was a big rail yards and people were very concerned about what we were going to build. And so we were trying to present the plan. One of the ways we did it was try to get people involved. We got the children involved because the children are very good ambassadors and children are generally much smarter than the parents. Like if you say to like the parents, we have to build a sustainable city, parents say, no, it's too hard, can't do it. The kids are like, okay, how do we do it, kind of. So what we did was we made a model in Lego of the whole site. And first of all, we used the gray bricks to show what was concrete. And we showed the green bricks to show what was green. And people really said, wow, actually, there's a lot of green here. So it was very kind of like pedagogical. And then wherever there was gray, we said we invited the children to build. But we told them, you know, you have to build sustainably, you know, you have to think about microclimate, you have to think about activities and safety. And for an 8-year-old kid, this is no problem, absolutely no problem. So the kids built the buildings on our plan. And then the kids explained to their parents how to build a sustainable city. And that was really powerful because if some foreign architect comes and tells you, you stop listening. I don't want to hear this foreigner tell me what to do. But when your kid explains to you, this is how I want us to build a more sustainable city, then you have a much smarter dialogue because the parents open their ears. They're a bit proud because my kid is doing this stuff. And of course, it's taking you on that mental journey. So I think everything we can do, I mean, maybe, you know, if the Lego is one of the best things we've ever done, maybe you can do it with drawing pictures, but have this wider debate and make it relevant by involving children who are the future citizens, and then you know, and then they can explain it.
I wanted to maybe just as an example to be really practical and be connected to the book. You talk about these Baugemeinschaft, these cooperatives in Germany, for example, and then because often in Estonia, I think flats are actually sold before they even exist, you know. But could we then also take another step and be part of the planning process already, invest in the real estate development, own it, you know? How could we have more owners in this world? Maybe that's the part about soft capitalism again as well.
No, I mean, that's a really great example. What really impressed me was when I come here is understanding this, I don't know if I'm allowed to call it the First Republic or the first part of the Republic, the amazing architectural urban production in a very short period, which is very, very distinct. The huge quality of architecture, you can see, you can spot it, you can see it as tangible in the city. And this is this kind of, and we can maybe talk about it as maybe bourgeois, but the way that the citizen built their city, and they're all different, it's citizen by citizen. And I think the German model has gone back to that. And it's kind of, I don't know, you call it like Bohemian bourgeois or something, because it's about sharing as well, it's going together. If I buy an apartment, all I can choose is I can maybe choose the light or the dark tiles in the bathroom. That's the only choice I get. Maybe I can choose the color of the kitchen or something. But having a system where I as a citizen can commission an architect to make a unique Estonian house on the site, that's a really great model. And I think it connects back to how we built the city in the past, building by building, citizen by citizen.
Yep, thank you. And we are now rounding up, so our time is almost up. So the book is out. It's there in Estonian, Pehme Linn. So maybe some concluding remarks from both panelists, or maybe a member of the audience has something you want to say very quickly, or if not, then some maybe final takeaway that we can take from this quite interesting discussion we've had.
I had a question. Do you think there will be interest in a Latvian version of the book?
Yes, let's do it.
No, but I would just say that is to be very, very positive. I mean, what we've learned, I think Jan Gehl often says, it's cheap to be nice to people. That so many of the things we're talking about here are actually very simple, they're quite straightforward, and they're not that expensive. And you can touch the lives of so many people that they can also be very, very relevant.
I think it's also maybe to take away, I really was moved by that when you said that we listen to the children, that to acknowledge, to be aware of that experience, we need to listen both to ourselves, you know, to our bodies, what's doing us good, what's not, which environment is doing us good, which is not. Someone opened the window here for a while ago, you all felt it, how the energy came back somehow into the room. Listen to each other, listen to yourself, and take a bit of moment to turn the focus inside. That's actually maybe our only freedom, where to turn the attention, really.
Yeah, so thank you, dear panelists. Thank you, audience, for your patience and involvement, and thank you, our web viewers. So it's been a pleasure to be in this company, and stay soft.
Yes, thank you.